Remember to give the video a thumbs up, share your insights in the comments, and subscribe to keep up with our newest tales. That night unfolded in a manner I could never have anticipated, transforming my perception of everything around me. The journey of my career, the decisions I made, and particularly the man who stood by my side for more than 10 years. Yet, there are moments that catch you off guard, revealing themselves like a masterfully orchestrated symphony, each note resonating profoundly within your soul. The evening began like any other. The annual gala of the company had just concluded, and the city lights twinkled through the expansive glass windows of the rooftop venue. The laughter of my colleagues lingered in my ears as I stepped into the cool night air, thankful for a moment of solitude away from the clamor. The slight pinch of my heels served as a constant reminder of the long hours I had spent on my feet, smiling through it all. As I prepared to depart, I glanced back at him. James Carter, the man who had been my boss for the last 12 years. With silver threading through his temples, impeccably attired, he exuded the self-assuredness of one who had forged his own path from the very beginning. At 61, he maintained his usual composure and control, yet there was an unmistakable shift in his expression that evening. "I simply stepped outside for a breath of fresh air," I replied, my lips curving into a faint smile. What an extraordinary celebration that was. He moved next to me, hands buried in his pockets, the familiar aura of command gently muted by the warm light of the street lamps. It was indeed. However, I must admit, these gatherings don't quite resonate with me. A soft laugh escaped me. Humorous. Each year, you glide through them effortlessly. "That's just business," he remarked, tilting his head slightly in my direction. In contrast, you appeared to genuinely relish the experience. I merely shrugged. "I suppose I've mastered the art of playing the role." He released a soft chuckle, and for a fleeting moment, we lingered in a serene silence. The city buzzed with life, yet in that fleeting moment, it was merely the two of us, shoulder to shoulder, distanced from the rigid conventions of the workplace. Then arrived the words I had not anticipated. He confessed, "I'm not ready to go home yet. Would you be interested in sharing a drink with me?" There was a moment of uncertainty. It was quite common for us to engage in conversations beyond the confines of our workplace, with late-night calls and strategy meetings that extended well into the evening hours. Yet, this experience carried a distinct essence. His tone carried an unspoken weight, a subtle nuance that quickened my pulse ever so slightly. "I certainly do." At last I spoke. "What's stopping us?" We strolled down the street, leaving behind the dazzling towers of downtown and venturing into a more tranquil part of the city. He guided me into a cozy lounge, where the lighting was dim and the gentle strains of soft jazz filled the air. It was a location that exuded a sense of eternity, remaining unscathed by the hurried pace of the outside world. As we nestled into a cozy corner booth, he unfastened his tie, a rare gesture that caught my attention. He gazed at me, truly gazed at me, as though perceiving me in an entirely different illumination. "You've been with the company a long time," he remarked, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "For a dozen years." I inclined my head in agreement. "Have you ever contemplated how life could have unfolded had you taken a different route?" His inquiry took me by surprise. "Are you inquiring whether I harbor any regrets about my decisions?" He gave a slow, deliberate shake of his head. "No regrets. Merely a matter of curiosity. Have you ever pondered the paths left unexplored?" I released my breath in a measured, deliberate manner. It seems that at some juncture we all find ourselves in that position. Yet, I have always held the conviction that each choice, each path we traverse, guides us precisely to our destined place. He offered a smile in response. That perspective reflects great wisdom. We engaged in a deep conversation, truly connecting, for the first time in years. It transcends the realm of work, the pressures of deadlines, and the confines of quarterly reports. It is fundamentally about life itself. He recounted his formative years, the challenges of establishing the company, and the sacrifices that accompanied the journey. I revealed fragments of my being, the aspirations I once nurtured, the experiences that molded me. The passage of time became indistinct. One drink flowed into two, then three. In that fleeting moment, As memories danced with laughter, the atmosphere around us transformed. He extended his hand across the table, his fingers lightly brushing against the back of mine, tentative, probing. I remained steadfast. A fleeting instant, a breath held in anticipation, where all possibilities teetered on the edge of uncertainty. And then, in a hushed tone, he confessed, "I've never shared this before, but my admiration for you extends far beyond your professional achievements. Your presence has a remarkable ability to anchor the world, providing a sense of stability amidst the surrounding chaos." My heart raced with a heightened rhythm. I had received my fair share of compliments, yet this one carried an unmistakable weight. It was not mere flattery. It was an essence profound, an authenticity that resonated. "You've always been the unwavering presence," he continued. Perhaps I lingered too long in my understanding of what that truly signifies. I swallowed, caught in a moment of uncertainty about how to reply. He transcended the role of a mere boss. He was a figure I had held in high regard for many years, a person whose insights I had cherished more than I was willing to acknowledge. And yet, as I sat there, enveloped in the cozy glow of that softly illuminated lounge, my mind drifted far from thoughts of work or the demands of professionalism. I pondered the way he gazed at me, as though perceiving a woman he had never permitted himself to truly acknowledge before. "I suppose it's time for me to head home," I finally murmured, though my tone betrayed a lack of certainty. He regarded me intently for a prolonged moment, then gave a nod of acknowledgement. "Allow me to guide you." The streets had grown quieter, the city easing into its late-night cadence. Upon arriving at my building, we paused at the entrance, savoring the moment. He expressed his gratitude for the evening, for the attentive ear offered to him. A smile graced my lips. The sentiment could easily be reciprocated. A moment of stillness, a flicker of uncertainty. In that fleeting moment, before doubt could creep in, I stepped closer, feeling the unspoken connection between us grow stronger. In that instant, the universe contracted to encompass just two souls, as the echoes of the past and the whispers of the future dissolved, leaving only the present moment to breathe. Yet, just as the moment hung in the air, I withdrew, my breath faltering. "Good night, James," I whispered, crossing the threshold before I could surrender to the depths of my emotions. As the door closed behind me, I paused, overwhelmed by the emotions of the night. For some reason, a change had occurred in our relationship, and deep within, I understood that this was merely the start. As dawn broke, I found myself rising earlier than my usual routine, my thoughts still ensnared in the happenings of the night before. The way James gazed at me, the heat of his hand resting on mine, the silent words suspended in the air around us. For years, I had viewed him solely as my superior, a figure of authority, respect, and an unbridgeable distance. Yet now my thoughts were consumed by him. James, the man who had shed his defenses, who had shared his innermost feelings with a gentle honesty, who had gazed at me in a manner that sent my heart racing. I shook my head, attempting to dispel the swirling thoughts as I poured my morning coffee. This was utterly absurd. Nothing transpired. Nothing was destined to occur. As I stepped into the office, an odd, persistent tension enveloped me, as though the very atmosphere had shifted. I glimpsed him through the transparent barrier of his office. He was engaged in a call, yet for the briefest instant, his gaze lifted and connected with mine. A moment of stillness, a moment of uncertainty. He offered me the faintest of smiles, a gesture so subtle that it was meant for my eyes alone. A subtle tempest stirred within me, a whisper of chaos hidden just beneath the surface. The hours slipped away in a haze of discussions and correspondence, yet my thoughts wandered endlessly. James's presence was more pronounced than ever, lingering at my desk with an unsettling frequency, his gaze lingering just a heartbeat longer than it should have. As the afternoon waned, a sense of restlessness began to stir within me. I craved the invigorating embrace of fresh air, a remedy to untangle the web of my thoughts. As I emerged onto the modest office terrace, I breathed in the invigorating autumn air. The city thrummed beneath, a harmonious blend of far-off honks and murmured conversations. Engrossed in my musings, I remained oblivious to the sound of the door creaking open behind me. It seems you have been steering clear of my presence. James' voice carried a serene quality, yet beneath the surface, a sharpness lingered. I pivoted, managing a soft laugh. Steering clear of you? That seems rather theatrical. He moved nearer, hands buried in his pockets, wearing that same inscrutable look on his face. Could it be? I let out a weary sigh, my fingers pressing against my temples. James, the events of last night, it was unlike anything else. He completed it for me. I am aware. I gazed up at him, the man who had been my companion for countless years, and yet in this instant, he seemed like a stranger. Perhaps, for the very first time, I was perceiving him with clarity. "We can't do this," I murmured, the words echoing with an emptiness that lingered even as they left my lips. He regarded me intently for what felt like an eternity, then let out a slow breath. "I can sense your thoughts. This poses a significant risk. It alters the course of events." "It indeed alters the course of events," I asserted with conviction. "James, you hold the position of my superior. Rules and expectations abound." "I don't care about rules," he interrupted, his voice low yet unwavering. My gaze fixed upon him. This was not the poised, deliberate individual I recognized. This was another individual, a person who, at last, found themselves free from the burdens of business, control, or responsibility. He found himself pondering my existence. "You're making this more complex than it needs to be," he continued, his tone now gentler. "Last night, we transcended the roles of boss and employee. We were merely two souls. And I am certain, we both experienced something profound." I gulped with difficulty. "That does not imply it is correct." He inclined his head, his eyes probing into mine. "And yet, you have not claimed that you do not feel it as well." I parted my lips, yet silence enveloped me. The truth lingered between us, palpable and unfiltered. A sensation had stirred within me, a sensation that had eluded me for quite some time. He edged nearer, his voice scarcely rising above a murmur. "If you believe I'm mistaken, I'll let it go. Last night will fade from my memory." I had the desire to. I longed to utter the words, to distance myself, to feign that everything could revert to its former state. Yet I refrained. I found myself uncertain about my desire to proceed. The atmosphere surrounding us shimmered with tension, an unseen force drawing us nearer. My breath caught in my throat as he extended his hand, his fingertips grazing my wrist with the lightest touch. A query, rather than an insistence. For the first time in years, the desire to think eluded me. I remained steadfast. His fingers lightly touched my wrist, a gesture that resonated far beyond its simplicity. My heart raced, the heat of his hand igniting a subtle tremor within me. For years, I existed within the confines of expectation, of myself, of my profession, of the age I carried. I had constructed a life anchored in certainty and logic. Yet, as I stood there, with James gazing at me as though I were an unforeseen revelation, I sensed the very walls begin to tremble. He lingered, his gaze fixed, searching for any indication that my desire mirrored his own. And in that instant, I took the plunge. I exhaled gently, releasing the tension within me. "James, I find myself uncertain about the direction this takes." He offered a faint smile. "I feel the same way. However, that does not imply we must flee from it." A gentle breeze whispered across the terrace, sending a shiver down my spine. He observed right away, removing his suit jacket and gently placing it over my shoulders. His scent, a whisper of spiced cologne, something warm and familiar, enveloped me. "Come on," he said, gesturing toward the office door with a nod. "It's time for us to leave this place." There was a moment of pause. "Are you referring to the present moment? What's stopping us?" His voice carried a lightness, yet beneath it lay a subtle, unwavering resolve. I cast a fleeting look back through the glass doors. The office buzzed with the vibrant energy of the day's end, as individuals navigated the familiar rhythms of their routines. Should I choose to re-enter, I could foresee the unfolding of the evening with crystal clarity. I would collect my belongings, return home, prepare a meal, and find myself in solitude with my reflections. feigning that nothing was different. Yet an undeniable shift had occurred. For the first time in ages, I felt a compelling urge to seize an opportunity without hesitation. "All right," I declared, my voice more composed than I had anticipated. "Let us embark on this journey." We found ourselves in a serene, softly illuminated restaurant just a short stroll away, the sort of establishment where the melodies lingered softly and the waitstaff communicated in whispers. As James poured a bottle of wine, the first sip cascaded down my throat, igniting a warmth that began to dissolve the tension within me. With a deliberate motion, I placed my glass on the table and inquired, "What precisely is our purpose here?" He reclined, observing me with that same inscrutable look he perpetually wore in the office. Yet this evening, an unfamiliar presence lingered in the air. To be frank, he swirled his wine, observing how the rich crimson liquid danced in the light. "I longed for a place with you, a sanctuary where pretense could be cast aside." I swallowed hard. Imagine, he locked his gaze with mine. That final night held no significance. The words settled in the space between us, weighty and indelible. I parted my lips, seeking the perfect words to express myself. Yet, for a change, I found myself yearning to cast caution aside. I preferred not to dissect each word prior to its escape from my mouth. I released a breath. Indeed, it did. A fleeting shadow danced across his features, perhaps a sense of relief, or perhaps something more profound. Our conversation stretched on for hours after that. It's not centered on work, nor is it about obligations. It's about the connection between us. I revealed to him truths I had kept buried for years, unspoken until now. How I had devoted so much time to prioritizing my career. How I had persuaded myself that love, passion, and connection were meant for others. Individuals in their youth. Individuals who possessed an abundance of time at their disposal. James absorbed every word, truly absorbed. As silence enveloped the moment, he extended his hand across the table, his fingers grazing mine in a gesture both unassuming and intentional, causing my breath to hitch. "He assured you that you are not alone in that sentiment, and I placed my trust in him." As we departed from the restaurant, the city had settled into a serene hush. The streets shimmered under the gentle amber glow of streetlights, while the distant murmur of traffic broke the stillness that enveloped us. We strolled for a time, both reluctant to utter the words of farewell just yet. At the crosswalk, he paused and looked back at me. "I don't want to rush this," he murmured gently. Yet, I am reluctant to feign indifference to its significance. My heart raced. "James." He let out a soft chuckle, shaking his head slightly. "Indeed, it is a complex matter." A soft, breathy laugh escaped my lips. That hardly captures the essence of the situation. We lingered for a moment, the city bustling around us, yet it seemed as if we were the sole inhabitants of the universe. In that moment, driven by impulse and instinct, I moved closer. James' breath caught in his throat, his gaze probing into mine. At last, I allowed myself to embrace my emotions. We shared a moment of closeness, tender and full of meaning, as though beginning a chapter neither of us had dared to write before. He reached out, his gesture filled with care and unspoken understanding. As we finally parted, his forehead gently lingered against mine. "This transforms the entire landscape, wouldn't you agree?" I spoke softly. Indeed, he whispered softly. Yet, perhaps that isn't as unfavorable as it seems. I shut my eyes, allowing the warmth of the moment to envelop me. Perhaps, just perhaps, he was indeed correct. As dawn broke the following day, a tempest of emotions stirred within me, a whirlwind of anticipation, trepidation, and the unknown. The memory of last night lingered, filled with a warmth I hadn't felt in a long time, in the way he gazed at me as if I were something truly worth the wait. Yet, as the morning sun poured through my bedroom window, the tendrils of reality began to weave their way back into my consciousness. I remained in his employ. He remained my superior. We had traversed a boundary that could never be reversed. The soft buzz of my phone resonated from the nightstand. "James, good morning. I trust there are no regrets." A faint smile tugged at the corners of my lips as I responded with my words. "None. You." He replied without hesitation, "James, not even one. May I have the pleasure of your company later?" I paused, caught in a moment of uncertainty, not due to a lack of desire. I did, yet I found myself uncertain about what the future held for us. Is it possible for us to thrive beyond the confines of the office? Beyond the carefully traced boundaries we had adhered to for such an extended period? With a deep inhalation, I gathered my thoughts. Indeed, a conversation is necessary before we proceed. That evening, we gathered in a serene park on the outskirts of the city, far removed from the clamor and the watchful gaze of the workplace. James stood there, poised against the bench, his hands tucked casually into his pockets as I approached. As I drew near, he lifted his gaze, and I noticed a gentleness in his expression that was unlike anything I had witnessed before. "Hey," he said. "Hey," I said, settling down beside him. For a fleeting moment, we lingered in silence, observing the golden rays of the setting sun weave their way through the branches of the trees. Then I began to speak. "James, I must seek your insight. What are the next steps from this point onward?" He released a breath, as though the question had been lingering in the air, patiently awaited. He confessed that he didn't possess all the answers, yet I am certain of what I wish to avoid. I wish for last night to remain a reality we acknowledge, not a memory we choose to erase. I inclined my head with deliberation. "I feel the same way." He pivoted in my direction. "Let us refrain from framing this in terms of rules or expectations. Let us shape this into something that reflects our essence, whatever form that may take." I swallowed hard. "And what of work?" He let out a gentle laugh. "I shall ensure this does not impact your career. Your efforts deserve more than that. Should the need arise for a discussion regarding boundaries in the workplace, we shall engage in that dialogue. Yet, I find myself reluctant to let go of whatever this may be, all due to mere logistics." His words found a resting place within me, stirring something profound and unspoken. For an eternity, I have allowed my trepidation of the unfamiliar to restrain me from embracing risks, from experiencing emotions I convinced myself were beyond my age. Yet there stood James, beside me, ready to unravel it all together. I extended my hand toward him. "Very well," I replied, my voice unwavering. "Let us embark on this journey and discover what unfolds." His smile radiated an unmistakable sense of relief. As he drew me into a slow, lingering kiss beneath the waning light of the evening, a realization washed over me. This was a night that transformed into something truly unforgettable. A fresh chapter unfolded.